The call came at 2:17 a.m. Jackson Reed's private line, the one only 5 people in the world had access to, lit up the darkness of his penthouse bedroom. He rolled over, blinking away sleep, and reached for the phone. As one of America's youngest billionaires, unexpected calls rarely brought good news. "Jackson Reed," he answered, his voice still thick with sleep. The silence on the other end lasted just long enough for him to consider hanging up. Then a woman's voice, familiar yet distant, like a song half remembered. "Jack, it's me, Audrey." The air left his lungs. Audrey Lawrence. 7 years of wandering, of private investigators and dead ends. 7 years since she had disappeared without a trace, taking with her the only person who had ever truly mattered to him. "Where are you?" His question came out harsher than intended, the culmination of years of anger, worry, and loss. "That doesn't matter right now," Audrey said, her voice breaking. "I need your help." "Only your blood can save him, Jack. He's dying." Him, their son, Noah. The boy Jackson had only known for 3 years before Audrey vanished with him in the middle of the night. The child who would now be 10 years old if he was still alive. What's wrong with him? Jackson was already out of bed, reaching for clothes, his mind racing. "Where is he?" "Audrey, I've been looking for you both for 7 years. Aplastic anemia." The medical term hung heavy in the air. "The doctors say he needs a bone marrow transplant." "I'm not a match," her voice cracked. "You're his only hope." Jackson closed his eyes, memories flooding back. The small apartment in Portland, where he'd first met Audrey. A waitress working double shifts while studying nursing. He'd been there on a business trip, still building his tech company. Not yet the billionaire he would become. They'd fallen hard and fast. Then came Noah, unexpected but immediately loved. "You need to bring him to Boston Children's Hospital," Jackson said, his CEO voice taking over, the voice that closed billion-dollar deals and commanded boardrooms. "I'll have my team arrange everything." "The best specialists—" "No," Audrey cut him off. "Not Boston. We're in Pine Ridge. It's a small town in Colorado. You need to come here, Pine Ridge." Jackson had never heard of it. "Why did you leave?" he asked, the question that had haunted him for 7 years. "We could have figured things out." "I loved you both." The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and regrets. "I'll text you the address," she finally said, ignoring his question. "Please hurry, Jack. He doesn't have much time." The line went dead. Jackson stood motionless in his vast bedroom, the night skyline of Manhattan twinkling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Within 5 minutes, his private jet was being prepared for takeoff. Within an hour, he was in the air, flying toward a past he thought he'd lost forever. Dr. Catherine Winters had worked at Pine Ridge Memorial Hospital for 30 years. In a town of barely 5,000 people, she knew everyone's medical history, family secrets, and personal struggles. But Audrey Lawrence and her son remained a mystery, even after 3 years in Pine Ridge. "His numbers are worse this morning," Catherine told Audrey, who hadn't left Noah's bedside in 3 days. The boy lay still, his skin pale as parchment against the hospital sheets, dark circles like bruises beneath his closed eyes. Once vibrant and full of energy, Noah now looked fragile, as though he might dissolve into the white linens. "He'll be here soon," Audrey whispered, more to herself than to the doctor. Her fingers gently brushed back Noah's sandy blonde hair, the same shade as Jackson's. Catherine checked the IV lines, adjusting the flow of fluids. "You never told me about his father." Audrey's eyes remained fixed on her son. "I never told anyone about him. And you're sure he'll come?" Catherine asked gently. "After all this time?" "He'll come," Audrey said with certainty. "He loved Noah more than anything." The doctor nodded, but her expression remained doubtful. "Even if he does, and even if he's a match, there are no guarantees, Audrey." "You know that." Audrey closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. "I know. But Noah deserves this chance." After the doctor left, Audrey pulled out a worn photograph from her wallet. 3 smiling faces looked back at her, herself younger and carefree. Jackson, handsome and relaxed in a way the business magazines never captured him. And between them, a laughing 3-year-old Noah, ice cream smeared across his cheeks. The last photo they'd taken as a family, the day before she'd fled with their son in the middle of the night. The hospital room door opened, and Audrey quickly tucked the photo away. But it wasn't Dr. Winters returning. A tall man with broad shoulders filled the doorway, his tailored suit incongruous in the small-town hospital. Though his hair was shorter now, and lines of stress marked his face, Jackson Reed was still unmistakably the man she'd fallen in love with 11 years ago. His blue eyes, Noah's eyes, moved from the small figure on the bed to Audrey's face. "I came as fast as I could," he said simply. Audrey rose, her legs unsteady. 7 years of running, of looking over her shoulder, of creating a new life far from the wealth and privilege she'd once briefly known, all of it condensed into this moment of reckoning. "Thank you," she managed to say. Jackson moved past her to Noah's bedside, his steps faltering as he drew closer. He reached out a hand, hesitated, then gently touched his son's arm. "He's so big," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I've missed everything." "Jack, not now," he interrupted, his eyes still on Noah. "First we save our son, then you tell me why you stole him from me." The monitors beeped steadily in the background, marking each precious heartbeat. Outside the window, snow began to fall on the small mountain town, covering everything in pristine white. And in the corridor beyond the room, a man watched through the door's small window, his expression darkening as he observed the reunion he'd tried so hard to prevent. "Word count? 1008, I notice. I am still well short of the required 1450 words for this block. Let me continue." The next morning found Jackson sitting in Dr. Winter's cramped office, a space that would fit inside his Manhattan bathroom. The walls were lined with outdated medical texts and framed diplomas. A window overlooked the hospital parking lot, where snow continued to fall in thick, lazy flakes. "Mr. Reed, we've confirmed you're a potential match for Noah's bone marrow transplant," Dr. Winters said, reviewing the preliminary tests they'd rushed overnight. "We'll need to run more comprehensive testing, but the initial results are promising." Jackson nodded, relief washing over him. "How soon can we proceed?" "Noah's condition is deteriorating rapidly. If the final tests confirm compatibility, I'd recommend moving forward immediately." She hesitated. "However, our facility isn't equipped for this procedure. He should be transported to a specialized hospital." "I've already arranged for a medical transport team to stand by," Jackson replied. "They can airlift him to Denver Children's Hospital as soon as you give the word." Dr. Winters raised an eyebrow. "I work quickly, Mr. Reed. It's what I do," he said simply. What he didn't say was that he'd spent half the night calling in favors, making arrangements, ensuring that money and influence would remove every obstacle between Noah and the treatment he needed. "There's something else you should know," the doctor said, her expression grave. "Audrey hasn't left this hospital in 3 days. She's been sleeping in that chair beside Noah's bed, barely eating. This isn't just about Noah's physical health. Audrey has been his entire world. He'll need both of you to get through this." Jackson's jaw tightened. "I understand." When he returned to Noah's room, Audrey was reading to their son, her voice soft and animated despite her exhaustion. The book was The Little Prince, and Jackson remembered reading the same story to Noah when he was a toddler. "The doctor says we can move forward," he announced from the doorway. Audrey looked up, relief flooding her features. She marked their place in the book and set it aside. "Thank you," she whispered. Jackson moved closer to the bed, studying his son's face. Noah looked so much like him, the shape of his eyes, the curve of his jaw. But there was Audrey in him too, in the gentle slope of his nose and the arch of his eyebrows. "When he wakes up," Jackson said quietly, "what will you tell him about me?" Audrey looked down at her hands. "He knows about you. I never kept you a secret from him. But you kept him a secret from me," Jackson countered, keeping his voice low. 7 years, Audrey. I thought you might be dead." "I thought our son might be dead." Before she could respond, Noah stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. For the first time in 7 years, Jackson looked into his son's eyes, his own eyes the same clear blue that stared back at him from every mirror. "Mom?" Noah's voice was weak, barely audible. "I'm here, sweetheart." Audrey leaned forward, smoothing his hair. Noah's gaze shifted to Jackson, curiosity replacing confusion. "Are you my dad?" The simple question knocked the wind from Jackson's lungs. He moved closer, kneeling beside the bed so he was at eye level with his son. "Yes, I am," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. A small smile tugged at Noah's pale lips. "You look like your pictures." Jackson glanced at Audrey, surprised. "I kept the photo albums," she admitted quietly. "He knows your face." Noah's small hand moved across the blanket, reaching toward Jackson. Without hesitation, Jackson took it, marveling at how perfectly it fit within his own. "Mom said you might come someday," Noah whispered, each word clearly costing him energy. "She said you would move mountains to find us if you knew where to look." Jackson swallowed hard, struggling to contain the complicated mix of grief, joy, and anger swirling inside him. "I would have," he promised. "And now that I've found you, I'm going to help you get better." Noah's eyes drifted closed again, exhaustion claiming him. Jackson continued holding his hand, unwilling to break the connection. "We need to talk," he told Audrey once Noah's breathing had evened out in sleep. "Not just about his treatment. About everything." Audrey nodded, resignation in her eyes. "I know, but not here." They moved to the small hospital cafeteria, finding a corner table away from the few other visitors. Jackson bought coffee for both of them, remembering without asking that Audrey took hers with extra cream. "No sugar." "You remembered," she said softly as he set the cup before her. "I remember everything," Jackson replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't necessarily a comfort. Audrey wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, drawing warmth from it as she prepared to face the conversation she'd been dreading for 7 years. "Why?" Jackson asked simply, his voice low but intense. "I deserve to know why you took my son and disappeared." Audrey's gaze dropped to the tabletop. "I was trying to protect him. From what?" "From me." Disbelief colored his words. "I loved that boy more than my own life." "Not from you," she clarified, meeting his eyes. "From what your life would do to him," Jackson's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Audrey took a deep breath. "Do you remember the week before I left? That charity gala in New York?" "Of course I do," Jackson replied. His company had just gone public, catapulting him into a new stratosphere of wealth. The media attention had been intense, photographers following them everywhere. "Someone approached me in the ladies' room that night. A woman." Audrey's voice dropped even lower. "She said her name was Diana Reed." Jackson's face paled. "My mother." "That's impossible." "She was in Europe. She came back for that event. She knew about Noah, about us, and she made it very clear what would happen if I stayed in your life." Diana Reed was old money Boston, the widow of a banking executive who had left her with a fortune and a sterling reputation to maintain. She had never approved of Jackson's relationship with Audrey, viewing the waitress-turned-nursing student as a gold digger, a threat to the Reed family legacy. "What exactly did she say to you?" Jackson demanded, his knuckles white around his coffee cup. "She told me she would make sure I lost custody of Noah, that she had evidence I was an unfit mother, fabricated evidence, but convincing. That her family had judges and politicians in their pocket." Audrey's voice trembled slightly. "She said if I fought her, she would make sure Noah grew up believing I abandoned him, that I chose money over him. And you believed her?" Jackson's voice rose slightly before he controlled it. "You believed I would let that happen?" "She had photos, Jack. Private investigators had been following us for months. She knew things, details about my past, about my family. Audrey's childhood had been difficult. Her father an alcoholic, her mother absent. Nothing criminal, but enough to paint an unflattering picture in a custody battle. She said the choice was simple. Leave quietly with Noah and she would never interfere, or stay and lose him anyway." Jackson ran a hand through his hair, processing this revelation. "So instead of coming to me, instead of giving me a chance to stand up to her, you just disappeared in the middle of the night. I was 24 years old. Jack, a single mother before I met you, barely keeping my head above water. Your mother represented everything I wasn't. Polished, powerful, connected. When she threatened me, I believed her. I cut ties with my mother years ago," Jackson said bitterly, "after you left. I knew she never approved of us, but I never imagined she would go this far." Audrey looked down at her coffee. "There's more." Jackson waited, his expression guarded. "2 men followed us for the first year. I changed our names, moved from town to town. I was always looking over my shoulder, convinced your mother had sent them to take Noah." She swallowed hard. "One night in Albuquerque, they almost caught up to us. I grabbed Noah from his bed and we slipped out the back door of our apartment just as they were coming in the front. Those weren't my mother's men," Jackson said quietly, his expression darkening. "They were mine. Private investigators I hired to find you." Audrey's eyes widened in realization. "Oh God, I spent millions trying to find you both, Jackson continued. Every lead went cold. Every trail disappeared. You were good at hiding, Audrey. I had to be, she whispered. I thought I was protecting our son. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the muffled sounds of the hospital around them. How did you end up here? Jackson finally asked, gesturing to the small-town hospital beyond the cafeteria doors. We moved around a lot that first year. Then we came to Pine Ridge. A small smile touched her lips. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, but they also mind their own business. I got a job at the local clinic as a nurse. Noah started school. We made a life. A life without me, Jackson said, the hurt evident in his voice. I thought about contacting you so many times, Audrey admitted, especially when Noah would ask about you. But the longer we were gone, the harder it seemed to find a way back. And now Noah is sick and you had no choice. Audrey nodded, tears filling her eyes. When the doctors said he needed a bone marrow transplant, I knew I had to call you. I couldn't let my mistakes cost him his life. Jackson reached across the table, not touching her, but extending his hand. I'm here now. For Noah. After a moment's hesitation, Audrey placed her hand in his. For Noah. They returned to the hospital room to find Dr. Winters checking Noah's vitals. The boy was awake, his eyes brighter than before. Dad's going to help me get better, Noah told the doctor confidently, the word Dad sounding natural on his lips. As though he'd been saying it his whole life, Jackson felt his heart constrict at the simple word, Dad. How many milestones had he missed? First day of school, lost teeth, learning to ride a bike, bedtime stories and skinned knees and Christmas mornings. That's the plan, Dr. Winters confirmed, smiling gently. We've scheduled the harvesting procedure for tomorrow morning. Mr. Reed, the helicopter will be ready to transport Noah to Denver immediately after. I'll be with him the whole time, Jackson promised, looking at his son. Both of us will, Audrey added. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Jackson stepped into the hallway to make phone calls. He arranged for the best hospital room in Denver, ensured the top specialists would be available, and ordered enough toys and books to fill a small store, all to be waiting when Noah arrived. As he was finishing his last call, he noticed a man watching him from the end of the corridor. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of someone who spent time outdoors, the man seemed out of place in the hospital setting. Can I help you? Jackson asked, ending his call and slipping the phone into his pocket. The man approached, his expression guarded. You're Noah's father. It wasn't a question. Jackson nodded, extending his hand. Jackson Reed. The man hesitated before shaking it. Robert Hansen. I'm a friend of Audrey's. Something in the way he said friend made Jackson reassess the man. You're more than that. Robert's jaw tightened slightly. Audrey and I have been seeing each other for about 2 years. Noah's like a son to me. The words hit Jackson like a physical blow. Of course, he'd had no right to expect Audrey would remain single all these years. But hearing that another man had been in his son's life, filling the role that should have been his, stung more than he was prepared for. Noah never mentioned you, Jackson said, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from his voice. He's been unconscious most of the time since you arrived, Robert pointed out. And Audrey thought it would be complicated. Jackson studied the man, noting the calloused hands of someone who worked with them, the simple but quality clothing, the honest concern in his eyes. What do you do, Robert? I own the hardware store in town. Do some carpentry on the side. His gaze was steady, unintimidated by Jackson's obvious wealth and power. I taught Noah how to build a birdhouse last summer. Another milestone missed. Jackson pushed down the surge of jealousy and loss. Thank you for being there for them. Robert seemed surprised by the sincere gratitude. I love them both, he said simply. Which is why I need to know what happens after Noah gets better. Are you planning to take them back to New York? The question caught Jackson off guard. He hadn't thought beyond saving Noah's life, hadn't considered the complex future that lay ahead. That's not my decision to make alone. Robert nodded, accepting this answer. Audrey's been running from something for as long as I've known her. Now I understand what or who. Just don't hurt them again. I never hurt them in the first place, Jackson replied sharply, then softened his tone. But I understand your concern. Noah's well-being comes first. For all of us. As Robert turned to leave, Jackson called after him. How did you know who I was? Robert glanced back. There's a photo. Noah keeps it by his bed, you, him, and Audrey at some beach. He calls it before. With that, the man walked away, leaving Jackson alone in the hallway, grappling with the reality that his son's life had been divided into before and after the night Audrey took him away. The morning of the procedure dawned clear and cold, the mountain air crisp as Jackson watched the sunrise from Noah's hospital window. The boy was sleeping, the beeping monitors a constant reminder of how fragile his condition had become overnight. His platelets dropped again, Audrey whispered, joining Jackson by the window. The dark circles under her eyes revealed she hadn't slept much. The doctor says we need to move forward today. Jackson nodded, his eyes still on the golden light spreading across the snow-covered peaks surrounding Pine Ridge. I've been thinking about what happens next, he said quietly. After he recovers, Audrey tensed beside him. And I've lost 7 years with my son, Audrey. I'm not willing to lose any more. He turned to face her. But I also understand that you've built a life here. Noah has school friends. You have... He hesitated. Robert. Surprise flickered across her face. You met him last night. He seems like a good man. Audrey's gaze dropped. He is. He's been wonderful to Noah. Jackson fought back the irrational resentment that rose at her words. We need to find a way forward that works for all of us. Especially Noah. Before Audrey could respond, Dr. Winters entered the room with a nurse, breaking the moment. We're ready for you, Mr. Reed, she announced. The procedure will take about an hour. Jackson looked once more at his sleeping son, then followed the doctor. As they walked, Dr. Winters briefed him on what to expect. The harvesting of his bone marrow would be done under general anesthesia. They would extract the marrow from his hip bones using hollow needles. He would experience soreness for a few days, possibly longer. None of that matters, Jackson told her. Just get what you need to save my son. As he changed into a hospital gown, Jackson felt an unfamiliar sensation, helplessness. For a man accustomed to controlling every aspect of his environment, to having the resources to solve any problem, this situation left him vulnerable in a way he hadn't experienced since building his company from nothing. When he woke from the anesthesia, Audrey was sitting beside his bed, her expression unreadable. Noah, he asked immediately, his mouth dry. They're preparing him for transport now. The helicopter from Denver will be here in 20 minutes. She handed him a cup of water. The doctor said they got a good harvest. Your marrow looks healthy. Jackson tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his lower back. I need to be on that helicopter with him. The medical team said there's only room for one parent, Audrey said, her tone careful. I think it should be me. You need to rest and... No. Jackson cut her off, swinging his legs over the side of the bed despite the pain. I'm coming. I've missed too much already. Audrey's expression hardened. This isn't about what you've missed, Jack. This is about what Noah needs. He's scared, and I'm the only parent he really knows. The words stung, but Jackson recognized the truth in them. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think of Noah rather than his own desires. You're right, he conceded. You should be with him. But I'll be following right behind you. My jet is waiting at the local airfield. Relief softened Audrey's features. Thank you. As she turned to leave, Jackson caught her wrist gently. Audrey, there's something I need to know. He met her eyes directly. Did you ever plan to contact me again? If Noah hadn't gotten sick, would I ever have seen my son again? Audrey's hesitation told him everything before she spoke. I don't know, she admitted finally. I told myself that when he was older, when he could understand better, maybe then... She shook her head. But the truth is I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me for what I'd done. Afraid you'd take him from me. I would never have taken him from you, Jackson said softly, no matter how angry I was. He needs his mother. He released her wrist. Go, be with Noah. I'll see you both in Denver. After Audrey left, Jackson dressed slowly, each movement sending pain radiating from his hip bones. A nurse offered him pain medication, which he declined. The discomfort seemed a small price to pay for the chance to save his son's life. Robert was waiting. In the hospital corridor, when Jackson emerged from the recovery room. I thought you might need a ride to the airfield, he offered, hands shoved in the pockets of his worn leather jacket. Jackson studied the man, trying to hate him for taking his place in Noah's life, but finding it impossible. Thank you. They walked in silence to Robert's truck. a well-maintained but clearly aging vehicle. As they drove through the small mountain town, Jackson took in the quaint main street, the local businesses with hand-painted signs, the friendly nods from pedestrians who recognized Robert's truck. "This seems like a good place to raise a child," Jackson observed. Robert glanced at him. "It is. Everyone looks out for each other here. Noah has friends whose parents own the bakery, the bookstore, the local diner. When he broke his arm last year climbing the big oak behind the school, half the town showed up at the clinic with homemade cookies and get-well cards." Another moment Jackson had missed. "He seems happy here," he said quietly. "He is." Robert hesitated, then continued. "But he's always wondered about you. Has this shoebox under his bed filled with things he thinks you'd like to see. Drawings, school projects, report cards. He calls it his dad box." Jackson turned to look out the window, hiding the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "I never stopped looking for him," he said after a moment. "For either of them." "I know." Robert's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Audrey told me everything last night. About your mother, about why she ran." They reached the small regional airfield where Jackson's Gulfstream waited, gleaming in the morning sun. As they pulled up to the gate, Robert put the truck in park but left the engine running. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think Audrey made a mistake not telling you the truth. Running instead of fighting." He looked Jackson in the eye. "But I also know she did it because she was terrified of losing him. And I understand that fear." Jackson nodded, acknowledging the complicated reality they all found themselves in. "I appreciate the ride. One more thing," Robert added as Jackson opened the door. "Noah asked me to give you this." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He did it yesterday when you were making phone calls." Jackson unfolded the paper to find a childish drawing of 3 figures, a small boy in the middle, holding hands with a woman on one side, and a tall man in what appeared to be a business suit on the other. Above it in careful block letters, "My family." "Thank you," Jackson said, his voice thick. Robert nodded once, then put the truck in reverse, leaving Jackson standing at the gate, holding the drawing as though it were made of glass. 3 hours later, Jackson arrived at Denver Children's Hospital. Having arranged for a car to meet his plane, he found Audrey in the waiting area outside the surgical suite, her face pale with worry. "They just took him in," she told him as he sat beside her. "The doctors are optimistic, but the procedure will take several hours." Jackson reached for her hand without thinking, an instinct from years ago when they faced challenges together. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. "He's going to be okay," he assured her, though he had no way of knowing this for certain. "He's strong." Like his mother, Audrey's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so afraid for so long. First afraid of losing him to your world, then afraid of losing him to this disease." "You're not going to lose him," Jackson promised. "And neither am I, not again." They sat in silence as the minutes ticked by, turning into hours. Occasionally a nurse would update them. The procedure was going well. Noah's vital signs remained stable. The transplanted marrow was beginning to circulate. "Mr. Reed," a hospital administrator approached, clipboard in hand. "There's a situation I need to discuss with you." She lowered her voice. "There's a woman in the lobby insisting on seeing you. She says she's your mother." Jackson felt Audrey stiffen beside him. "My mother is here?" he asked, disbelief coloring his tone. The administrator nodded. "She's quite persistent. Security is with her now." Jackson turned to Audrey, whose face had gone even paler. "It's okay," he assured her. "I'll handle this." "Jack, she can't take him," Audrey whispered, the old fear visible in her eyes. "No one is taking Noah," Jackson said firmly. "Stay here. If there's any news about his condition, call me immediately." In the main lobby, Jackson found Diana Reed seated in a corner, 2 security guards hovering nearby. At 72, she remained formidable. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, posture rigid, expression imperious, as she surveyed the hospital lobby with disdain. "Mother," Jackson greeted her coldly. "What are you doing here?" Diana rose, dismissing the security guards with a wave of her hand. "Is that any way to greet your mother after 7 years, Jackson? How did you find out about Noah?" "I have my sources," she replied vaguely. "How is the boy?" "Fighting for his life," Jackson said bluntly. "No thanks to you." Diana's expression remained impassive. "I understand you're angry." "Angry doesn't begin to cover it," he interrupted. You drove away the woman I loved and my son because they didn't fit your perfect image of what my life should be. I did what I thought was necessary to protect you and the Reed name, Diana countered. That woman was using you, choosing your success to— Her name is Audrey, Jackson cut in, his voice hard. And she loved me before I had anything to offer except myself. Which is more than I can say for you. For the first time, Diana seemed taken aback. I've always wanted what's best for you. No, Jackson corrected her. You've always wanted what's best for your reputation, your social standing, your legacy. You never once asked what I wanted. And what is that? Diana asked, a hint of genuine curiosity in her voice. A family, Jackson replied simply. The family you took from me. Diana's expression softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability rarely seen on her aristocratic features. I may have misjudged the situation, she conceded, choosing her words carefully. And for that I regret the outcome. It was as close to an apology as Diana Reed had ever come. Regret doesn't make up for 7 lost years, Jackson replied, his voice low but firm. It doesn't erase the nights I spent wondering if my son was even alive. It doesn't give Noah back the father he should have had all this time. Perhaps not, Diana acknowledged. But I'm here now. To meet my grandson, Jackson shook his head. That's not happening. Not today. Maybe not ever. That's not my decision to make alone. He checked his watch, anxious to return to the surgical waiting area. Noah is in surgery right now, fighting a battle no 10-year-old should have to face. If he survives, when he survives, it will be Audrey's decision whether you ever meet him. Diana's eyes widened in surprise. After decades of controlling every aspect of the Reed family dynamics, being denied access to her only grandchild was clearly unexpected. You would give her that power? She asked. She's his mother, Jackson stated simply. She's raised him alone, protected him, loved him. While you were busy destroying our family, she was building one for Noah. A flicker of something, perhaps genuine remorse, crossed Diana's face. And what about you, Jackson? What role will you play in their lives now? It was the question that had been haunting him since Audrey's late-night call. Whatever role Noah needs me to play, he answered honestly. Whatever role Audrey will allow. Diana studied her son, seeming to truly see him for the first time in years. You still love her. It wasn't a question, but Jackson answered anyway. I never stopped. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Before Diana could respond, Jackson's phone rang. Audrey's name flashed on the screen. I have to go, he told his mother, already turning away. Jackson, Diana called after him. He paused but didn't turn back. For what it's worth, I am sorry. This time, the apology sounded genuine, but Jackson merely nodded once before answering his phone as he walked away. The surgery is finished, Audrey told him, her voice trembling with emotion. He's in recovery. The doctors say it went even better than expected. Relief flooded through Jackson, so powerful he had to lean against the wall for support. I'll be right there. When he returned to the surgical floor, he found Audrey speaking with the transplant specialist, a distinguished-looking man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Reed, the doctor greeted him, extending his hand. I'm Dr. Mitchell. Your son is a fighter. The transplant went smoothly, and his initial responses are promising. The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical as we monitor for any rejection, but I'm cautiously optimistic. When can we see him? Jackson asked. He's being moved to the pediatric ICU now. Once he's settled, you can both go in. He'll be heavily sedated for the next several hours, possibly until morning. After the doctor left, Jackson turned to Audrey. My mother is here. Audrey's face drained of color. What? How did she— I don't know, Jackson interrupted gently. But she won't be seeing Noah, I've made that clear. Audrey released a shaky breath. After all this time, she still wants to control everything. Not anymore, Jackson assured her. She has no power over us unless we give it to her. A nurse approached, informing them that Noah was settled in the ICU and they could see him. They followed her down the corridor to a private room where their son lay connected to various monitors and IV lines. Despite the tubes and wires, despite the pallor of his skin, Noah looked peaceful. Jackson and Audrey took positions on either side of the bed, each holding one of Noah's hands, creating a circle of connection that had been broken for too long. "What happens now?" Audrey asked softly after several minutes of silence. Jackson looked up, meeting her gaze across their son's sleeping form. "That depends on you. On Noah, on what you both want." "And what do you want, Jack?" The question was direct, forcing him to articulate the thoughts that had been forming since he'd received her call. "I want to be part of his life. Part of your lives, if that's possible. Not to disrupt what you've built, but to add to it." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I understand there's Robert to consider." Audrey's expression grew complicated. "Robert knows this changes everything. He's giving me space to figure things out." "He loves you," Jackson observed. "Yes," Audrey admitted, "and he's been good to us. But?" Jackson prompted, sensing there was more. Audrey looked down at Noah, her thumb gently stroking the back of his small hand. "But seeing you with Noah, watching how quickly you connected despite all the years apart, it made me realize I've been hiding from more than just your mother." "What do you mean?" "I've been hiding from what I still feel for you," she confessed, not meeting his eyes. "It would have been easier if you'd moved on. If you'd remarried, had other children?" "There's only ever been one family for me," Jackson said simply. "You and Noah." For the first time since their reunion, Audrey's smile reached her eyes. "We have a lot to figure out." "We do," he agreed. "But we have time now. Thanks to this little fighter." He nodded toward Noah, whose chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of healing sleep. The next morning, Noah woke briefly, groggy but aware enough to recognize both his parents at his bedside. His smile, though weak, was the most beautiful sight either of them had ever seen. Over the following days, as Noah's condition steadily improved, Jackson and Audrey began the delicate work of reimagining their future. They spent hours talking while Noah slept, unraveling 7 years of separation, of misunderstandings and growth apart. On the 5th day, as they shared lunch in the hospital cafeteria, Jackson broached the subject they'd been circling. "I have a proposal," he began, setting down his coffee cup. "Not a perfect solution, but maybe a starting point." Audrey looked up from her salad, curious. "I'm listening. I own a house in Aspen. It's about an hour and a half from Pine Ridge. I rarely use it, but it's there." He leaned forward slightly. "What if I split my time between New York and Colorado? I could be close enough to be part of Noah's daily life, without uprooting him from the town and friends he loves." Audrey considered this. "And your company?" "I have excellent people running day-to-day operations. I can work remotely most of the time, fly to New York when necessary." He smiled slightly. "Being a billionaire has its advantages. You'd do that? Rearrange your entire life?" "In a heartbeat," Jackson answered without hesitation. "Actually, I've already started the process. I called my executive team yesterday." Audrey set down her fork, visibly moved by his commitment. "And what about us, Jack? Where do we fit in this arrangement?" "That's up to you," he said carefully. "I meant what I said before. I never stopped loving you, Audrey. But I understand that 7 years is a long time. You have a life, relationships. I don't expect to walk back in and pick up where we left off." Audrey reached across the table, taking his hand. "I ended things with Robert last night," she said quietly. "It wasn't fair to him or to me to pretend we could go back to what we had. Not with you back in our lives." Hope flickered in Jackson's chest, but he tempered it with caution. "That doesn't mean—" "No," she agreed. "It doesn't mean we automatically get our happy ending. But it means I'm willing to find out if we can build something new, something better." A week later, Noah was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions for follow-up care. The doctors were pleased with his progress, calling his response to the transplant remarkable. Though the road to complete recovery would be long, the worst was behind them. As they prepared to leave Denver, Diana Reed made one final attempt to see her grandson, sending an elaborate gift basket to Noah's hospital room. Jackson intercepted it, reading the attached note. "To my grandson Noah, I hope someday to meet you. With love, your grandmother." He showed the note to Audrey, leaving the decision in her hands. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Maybe someday, when Noah is stronger. When we're all stronger as a family." It was a tiny opening, but more than Jackson had expected. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Jackson stood on the back deck of his Aspen home, watching as Noah raced across the lawn with his new puppy, a golden retriever named Chance. The boy's cheeks were flushed with. Audrey leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Their journey back to each other had been careful, deliberate. Weekend visits, family dinners, honest conversations late into the night after Noah was asleep. They were building something stronger than what they'd had before. Foundation first. I was thinking, Audrey said, turning to face him. Maybe it's time we discussed a more permanent arrangement. Jackson raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Noah loves this house. He loves being close enough to visit his friends in Pine Ridge, but he also loves having you here every day. She took a deep breath. What if we made this our home? All three of us? Jackson's heart swelled with a happiness he'd once thought lost forever. Are you sure? Audrey nodded, her eyes clear and certain. 7 years ago I ran away because I was afraid of losing Noah. I've spent too long living in fear. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. I'm not afraid anymore. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Jackson pulled her closer and kissed her, a promise of the future they would build together.